It's your boy. I'm back, and I'm gonna try to put something out every day. I know we're behind, and I'm gonna get you guys a lot of videos. It was a busy week. I'll be away as well this week, but I'll be able to give you videos every day. So it was just a crazy weekend, busy. Um, Shout out to South Jersey Joe and his father. I hope that the sauce came out good. And we're gonna start off. I'm gonna go into a few topics because I got hit with a lot of topics that people want to know. So instead of taking the route of a lot of podcasters and explaining the history and who's got the right rules and who's got the wrong rules, I'm just gonna give you the stories that happened within the crew that I ran with and the guys that I was around when I was in the streets. I don't like to talk about other crews unless I have first hand knowledge of it, then I will. So for now, I'm just going to keep it on me and the guys that I was going around with. And I'm hoping that when we get to the jail part of this whole week, that it helps people to understand that ain't been there and that's still in the streets to get out. Because the way I grew up, the way I was raised, uh, having a narcissist and a sociopath for a mother, kind of built me to be ready for what was ahead of me when I first went into Rikers Island. And a lot of people that I was hanging out with, that I was growing up with, I knew weren't built like that. So it was like one of the first things I did after I laid off for like almost 4 months. That time, waiting to get a bail reduction, waiting for it to turn into a bond, and it was just a whole, mess of stuff with that. So I came right home and I told all the guys that I knew, I was just like, listen, it's not for you. Get out of the business. After a while, guys thought I was just preaching. You know what I mean? It was like, all right, enough already. And it's like, I'm just trying to get it into your heads, man. You guys love this lifestyle, remote controls, running water, refrigerator, things that you'll, are like I said, like a remote control. Like, just it's insane. So, but we're gonna start out with something that somebody asked me. Everybody likes me. That everybody been asking me, and they want to hear more about how hanging around a guy that's connected or hanging around a guy's son who's a made guy, a captain, a boss, a consigliere, whatever. And they want me to touch on it a little bit more. Well, I'm gonna break it down for you a little bit easier, right? And this is like one of the best ways to explain it to you. So, years back, there was a powerful family in Howard Beach, right? And cousins were at war with each other, but not at war where they were shooting and stabbing. Maybe a couple punches were thrown. I don't know how that part ended up started. I don't know how it ended up. I don't know how it started, but it was one of those things where neither one of them would ever talk again. And I think to this day they still have it. So yeah, it was like that bad. But the problem was one of them was like a Howard Beach guy and an Ozone Park guy. And his father was a big shot, big as they come. And his uncles were big shots, and his cousins were big shots. And he was a tough kid and became a big shot himself. And his cousin that he winds up getting to the beef with is all Howard Beach, 100% Howard Beach. So one night, they're all in a club. The one cousin who's friends with the kids from Ozone Park had a couple kids with him from Howard Beach and a bunch of guys from Ozone Park. Now, at this point, Howard Beach and Ozone Park, the older guys, they're really ain't clicking yet. And then the other cousin happens to be there because it was a popping club at the time, and if it was a popping club, all the guys that was somebody's were going to that club. So he happened to be there with all his Howard Beach friends. So they're partying on one side of the club. You know, the guys from Ozone Park with a couple kids from Howard Beach are partying on the other, two cousins. Now, no matter what, if we're in a club, if it's anywhere that's outside of our neighborhood, and you see kids from Howard Beach get into a fight. I don't know if Howard Beach would ever help us. I never seen that. But Ozone Park will always help Howard Beach because we were the guys. I was a younger guy, the older guys that hung out in the cafes, the social clubs, and with these guys, these younger guys, and the same age guys, fathers, uncles, cousins, because all the social clubs, cafes, like I was saying, were in Ozone Park. Because the first stop at East New York is Ozone Park. So probably 90% of them came from East New York and settled in Ozone Park, but, put their families up in a nice house in Howard Beach and kept their social club and pizzerias and cafes in Ozone Park back then. So if we ever seen any of the kids from Howard Beach who we knew their fathers and their uncles and their cousins, the kids from Ozone Park were always up for a good fight anyway. They would definitely jump in and they definitely would help. Even if we were still warring or beefing in the streets to get against each other, that's something you don't do. You know what I mean? You jump in, you help. And there's an old saying, and I've always hated this saying, and it's used for everything. It's used for women. It's used for guys that certain people don't like. When a guy in position or in power gets a guy around them, and now that guy's with him, but a lot of other crews and other bogadas, they don't like that guy. There'll be a sit down, and somebody will actually say, respect the dog for its master. It's one of the biggest sayings that you can ever go to a sit down about when it comes to in this kinds of situations. I can't tell you, I've heard it over women, I've heard it over, um, you know, sheet guys, Jogo Poker guys, sports guys, credit card guys, that just jumped on a May guy. Because listen, everybody says, when you're a captain, you get a crew. No, there's May guys that get a crew. You know what I mean? For instance, a guy like Sonny Francis, right? Even before Sonny Francis got bumped up, I seen it, but I was young when he came in when first time I've ever seen him in my life. But I was always told by my mother's uncles and that everywhere Sonny went, there was 20 guys with him. And May guys get a crew. A crew of associates. You know what I mean? That have to earn money for them so they could kick up to their captain. So even, May guys do get a crew. So don't let that get, a little twisted. So in that situation, back then, you always got to respect the dog for its master. So even if it's a May guy, maybe we run with him, hang out in his club, run sports for him, whatever we might do, favors, anything. And I'm talking about this was a bunch of guys older than me from Ozone Park hanging out with the South Beach guys. So what winds up happening, right? A beef breaks out. Who does the beef break out with? Breaks out with the cousin from Howard Beach with all his friends from Howard Beach. They were getting the best of them. Howard Beach was losing. And the kid, the cousin, follows a bigwig. Big as they come. And the other cousin isn't moving. And the kids from Ozone Park see this happening. And one of them go to make a move. And somebody stops him and he goes, are you going to go against them? He goes, what do you mean? He goes, come on. If you go over there, these guys are never going to talk again over the beef that they had. That's how serious the beef was. He goes, if he ain't moving, if he's just watching it, that's what we're going to do. And the person that I know that's in this situation is probably one of the most stand-up street guys that you could ever imagine, think of, and just a straight up stand up out of his balls the size of an elephant. His name was Jerry. Serious guy, did a ton of jail time. He's doing a ton of jail time now. Just as stand up as can be. You know, I can probably say at one time, all five families wanted him at one point. I would go with him, take a ride to meet somebody. He'd ask me to come with him, and he'd be going to meet. He wasn't even made, and but well, I mean, he's been in and out of jail. So many guys. I mean, he was with the acting boss of the Lucchese family on one of his bids, and he sent them home and said, "I want him straightened out," just like that. So whoever you got to speak to, he was friends with the Gambino family, so his loyalty when he was a kid was with them because he grew up around 77th Street. So he would never do that, even though it was never offered to him, but they wanted to, the Gambinos. He would never, and people say, well, he's an associate or he's a friend, so it really wouldn't look bad. Some guys hold themselves in such a regard that they carry themselves as a wise guy. So to them, that would be a betrayal. I've been around this guy my whole life, and I'm gonna go up and get straightened out with another family. Now, another crew, that's different. If you're in the same Bogota, that's fine. But some people, now you don't have to, right? Because if you're not on record or if you're not a made guy, it's not, it really is not frowned upon. You'll be spoken about in small circles. Guys will be like, ah, can you trust that guy? He's been around us for 20 years, regardless if he wasn't made. Some associates hold themselves to that level because a lot of these associates that aren't straightened out earn more money, put more work in, and he definitely earned more, and he definitely put the work in, bottom line. And he was very upset with it. And I know. He was like, there's no way I can't do this. I don't like any of them. He goes, but there's going to be hell to pay for this. And they're like, well, if your loyalty's over here, your loyalty's over here. And I already know that the person that we're being loyal to, he's not going to get in trouble because his father's almost just as powerful as his cousin's father. So they're going to, they're going to understand why he didn't do nothing. Well, what winds up happening is he wasn't that good of a fighter, the other cousin, and he got pretty. He had to go to the hospital. He got it pretty bad. These guys went to work on him pretty bad, and all his guys. And now there's not a scratch on anybody from Ozone Park, and of course the two or three guys from Howell Beach. So now for like the next month, there was sit downs. There was, and I'm trying to explain to you. People were like, yeah, hanging out with a wise guy's kid. Why would they put the blame on you? Why would? Because you're the guy that's not connected. You're the guy that's hanging out in front of the club that's supposed to be getting into fights, that's supposed to be putting work in. You know who that kid is? Respect the dog for its master. That was a respect. That was a respect the dog for its master moment right there. It wasn't a I'll ask for forgiveness instead of permission moment. It was you got to respect the dog for its master. But everybody knew that. It wasn't like nobody knew that, and everybody was understanding that. Now there was a couple other guys there from Ozone Park that actually ran into May guys that were from our side, of Ozone Park, not Howard Beach, and they got cracked. One was a drug dealer, he got cracked. I was in the car wash with him, he got cracked. A couple other guys got cracked by, you know, the guys that we were hanging around, the guys that we looked up to, the older guys, the wise guys, the street, guys that were in the club that would eventually be wise guys anyway, but you gave them that kind of respect anyway because they're on their way. And this is the way it was, and I'm only going to give you what I know and what I've seen to be true. How other people feel and what other neighborhoods did, that's not how it worked in Ozone Park and Howard Beach. 100%. Now they're on a rampage. Okay? They're looking for all the guys that didn't fight. Now, the cousin that they stuck up for, he put his 2 cents in, but he used his brother and he used one of his other cousins to say they were with me and they showed loyalty to me. And his uncle said to him, well, you're my family, And I'm not going to do anything to you for making that decision, but somebody has to pay for it. See, they look for somebody that has to pay for it. Instead of taking it out and finding out who the guys are that did it, which they did, and it got taken care of like that. But the guys that didn't do nothing, and it's always and not getting off topic, just understand this. We would get into a brawl at a club, at a bar, and then we'd end up back in our neighborhood at a bar, and there'd be guys bleeding. Maybe a guy went to the hospital, a guy all beat up, and then there'd be a guy sitting, two, three guys sitting in the corner without a mark on them. Now, without they might have been good fighters. They might have one might have got there late or whatever. And I've seen the older guys come in or the guys from the clubs come into the bar and see these guys bleeding and seeing these guys with no marks on them get cracked around. Like, why is he bleeding and you're not? And these were like the rules of the old school guys that they were putting down on us. Our generation didn't do that. If we knew a guy that ran or a guy that didn't fight or, something to that effect, then yeah. But if the guy don't got a scratch on him, maybe he wasn't a good fighter, so he backed away a little bit. Who knows? When you're in a club or you're in a bar or you're in a diner, I mean, we brawled everywhere. And it always, it was more brawls at the diner probably than the clubs and the softball field and the football field. Those were always brawls. You get back to the diner, 4 a.m., 5 a.m., everybody goes to the diner. And what happens? Kids from one neighborhood, kids from another neighborhood, and the diner's upside down. Every week, as long as the damages got paid for, they very rarely called the cops. As long as the waitresses didn't get hurt, because it happened every weekend. And if you started, I mean, the cops came, a lot of times, but a lot of times they didn't. But if it was known that the diner kept calling the cops, nobody would give them their business. So they let it be until, it was work. If a guy's bleeding on the floor, cut, hit with a ketchup bottle, that's just the way it was from the 90s into the early 2000s. So this guy wound up having to go to the hospital, get some stitches, and now they want people in the neighborhood, and they find out that this kid Jerry was there. Now, everybody knows Jerry. Jerry's a stand-up guy. Jerry's gonna fight. Jerry's gonna stab you. Jerry's gonna shoot you. He's been to jail for shootings. He's been to jail for stabbings. He didn't go to jail for stabbings. People, baseball batted people. Tough, tough, tough. Just a regular tough kid from the neighborhood. And bigger than that, just not a neighbor kid. He was bigger than that. He was, world size tough guy, 100%. And they found out he was there. So what happens is somebody at the time who was extremely powerful sends for him. Now, the Gambino family has a guy that we used to call Manson, Charles Caniglia. Stone cold maniac. Now, not getting off topic, I'm going to try to make you understand the things that went on while we were hanging out into the life, okay? So now I'm explaining Charles to you, and then we're going to get back to the story, all right? So now this is learning this as a teenager, what they wrote in the newspaper years later. But these guys we see every day. That's what a lot of people don't understand, in the candy store, at the club, at the bar, at certain bars, at certain clubs. Like, and, he has a big name. You know what I mean? He's a captain. He's, the same size as Charles Manson. And he definitely probably got more bodies than Charles Manson. And he's probably even crazier. Definitely tougher. He's probably doing like 6 life sentences right now. Stone cold maniac. And what happened was, and this is when Howard Beach was Howard Beach and Ozone Park was Ozone Park. You couldn't even smoke a joint. I always tell you guys that in Howard Beach. You got caught smoking a joint, you got a beating. They'd lock the park down, close you in, and give you a beating for smoking a joint. Right? Well, back then they smoked blunts. They'd get a beating for that. That's how Howard Beach was. You weren't smoking pot. You weren't robbing cars. You weren't robbing houses. You weren't doing nothing in Howard Beach. And this is when kids were hanging out, when it was 7 degrees outside. I drive through that neighborhood at night now, not a soul. Drugs ruin that area. Opioids. And you know what they said? They said when Cosa Nostra was there that, oh, they rid their neighborhood with drugs and heroin. No, it was never cleaner than when Cosa Nostra was there. Now, I'm not preaching that, but they're wrong when it comes to that. When Cosa Nostra is there, crime is down. There is no drugs in that neighborhood. Do other neighborhoods, do other areas get affected with the drugs? Probably. Most likely. Absolutely. But not the neighborhoods where they rest their head. They don't flood the neighborhoods with nothing. And that's why you had lawyers and doctors that wanted to live there. On top of gangsters and judges, they all wanted to live there. Right? The houses were bungalows at one point, and they built them up to be mansions, and New Howard became the elite place to live. And there was 1,000 kids growing up in that neighborhood. And I don't even know where, if there isn't even kids today in Howard Beach. I never see kids hanging out anymore, hanging out in the park. Every time I drive through there, nothing. There's a lot of overdoses, a lot of opioid addiction, a lot of heroin, like insane. Like it's flooded. It's everywhere now. Now I think it's just a country epidemic. It's just not like a New York or Utah, because I was watching something. Utah was like a big, epidemic there, a big problem in Florida because it had the most pharmaceutical factories. But now they moved on from the pills right to the heroin. They found out that it's stronger, lasts longer, and it's cheaper. So there's a lot of people dying of heart attacks, which are caused from, drug abuse. So back in the day, it wasn't like that. Not getting off topic. Stay with me. Now, this is just a regular day. 20, 30 kids hanging out. They just happen to be hanging out in front of Charles's brother's house, John Caniglia. That you always hear people talk about John, they talk about a man's man, a gangster's gangster. John Caniglia is a gentleman, he's a gangster, he's a tough guy, he's a father, he's a grandfather, and from my understanding, he's one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. Serious guy, He's home now, retired, and just living, the rest of his life out under the radar, not bothering with anybody. One of the young kids shot a gun, right? Just shot a gun in the air, which you hear gunshots, I can't tell you how many times a day in these neighborhoods, but not back then. This was the 90s. They shot a gun in the air. Come to find out later on, and I'm explaining Charles to you so we can get to the who came to him to tell him he needed to go in because he had a relationship with Charles. So I'm just explaining Charles to you. Now, if they sent Charles, this is what I want you to understand the magnitude of what happens if a wise guy's son gets hurt in a fight and you were there and you didn't do nothing. This is how Ozone Park and Howard Beach and East New York, before they all moved in, operated. These were the rules. This is what happens. I remember when we used to draw straws. We didn't really draw straws. Who was going to drive my friend's father for the night when he didn't have his driver? Because it was like, oh, we got to watch him, got to babysit, got to make sure nothing happens. Anything happens to him, your ass is on the line. But you know what happened? Most of the times, I've had plenty of fights with him in bars and clubs, and we both walked out a little lumped up, never said a word. That's just the way he was. He was a down and dirty guy. And I'll get into those stories, nights out in the bar and big pens and no weapons against four guys. But thank God he was like that. Some wise guys aren't. So we'll get into those stories when we get to him. Nights out with a captain. At the time, he was just straightened out. Maybe he was acting captain. It was through the whole bit from May guy to acting captain to captain until he went away. And so now somebody shoots a gun in front of Johnny Caniglia's house. Now, listen to me. I know people say life ain't as strong as it is. It's this, it's that. Oh no, it was thriving in the 90s. Thriving. All the kids scatter. But now they just scattered. You know what I mean? Now, it wasn't purposely done in front of John Caniglia's house. They just all happened to be hanging out by his house in front of it in Howard Beach, and kid was showing off, and he shot a gun. But he never fesses up to it. And this kid's father, which is Howard Beach, so every kid's father, somebody, but this kid's father was as high as they come in his regard at one time. So I'm pretty sure he would have fessed up to it. They would have been like, "Don't do that again." Or, yeah, you might maybe a crack. I don't know. But they grabbed two kids. One of them I know was named Dennis, and they grabbed another kid. But I know Dennis got the bad end of something. So for firing a gun, he got the blame for it. Charles Caniglia took his pinky toe off with acid. So when you hear these rumors, which they write in the newspaper, and when they said his favorite way of disposing of bodies was acid, was a barrel of acid, a drum of acid, they weren't bullshitting. Because I knew that since a teenager. That kid lost his toe. I'm pretty sure the one next to it got ruined too. Because he poured acid on it. Because he thought, and he took it, he knew who shot the gun, and the kid took it. Took it like a man at it. Teenagers. This is what they're being bred for, right? Even though some of them born with silver spoons in their mouth, a lot of them are looking to take that route. And he got his pinky toe taken off with acid. This is the man that's going to give the message to Jerry that he has to go see somebody very powerful over somebody's son catching a bad beating in a club. And he was one of the guys that got picked out that stood there and did nothing. Regardless that you don't get along with them, regardless that you actually hate them, even without being with the cousin who hates them, we hate everybody from Howard Beach. We want nothing to do with them. You respect the dog for its father. You know who he is? I mean, if you could, some guys could say, I had no idea who he was, but the crew that was there, they knew who he was. He was, that famous in that life. So this is the man that we're dealing with that's going to go and tell Jerry he has to meet with another powerful guy in the Gambino family over this situation. He just took a 15, 16-year-old kid's toe off because somebody said he shot a gun in front of his brother's house. Now, this is the magnitude of the guy that we're dealing with. With that, we're going to wrap that story off. Dennis gets his toe taken off with acid. 20 years later, you're reading in the newspaper, his favorite way to dispose of bodies was a drum or a barrel full of acid. So it's kind of a little strange to see it when you already knew about it, but then hearing it on such a level and just knowing the guy, you just knew the guy was a maniac anyway. You knew it. And these are the guys that you see every day. This is what we grew up around. You want to call stories bullshit. This is just everyday life. There's nothing to bullshit about. It ain't me doing it. It's just the neighborhood that we grew up in. And every day something like this went on in Ozone Park at Howard Beach. That's just one story. The content that I could just give you on everyday life growing up in areas like that, there was something every day. So now this certain situation went on for a month. So now I gave you the guy that turned around and took a guy's toe off for a gunshot in the air in front of his brother's house. Okay? For something that Listen, it's a gunshot. I understand it's dangerous, 100%. But there was no malice in it. Kid was showing off, shot the gun in the air. When he was young, he was known as like a ballsy kid. So I guess he was just showing off in front of girls, whatever. And this kid didn't give him up, and he got his toe taken off. So now that's the guy, Charles Caniglia, who they send to tell Jerry he has to go meet a certain high ranking, powerful guy in the Gambino family, which was Carmine the Bull. Now, at this point, people can say what they want about him. The guy was legit. The guy was for real. John Sr.'s son-in-law. They got all the power in the 90s. Doing phenomenal. I didn't know him to be and not a legitimate guy. I know he did some time, did a lot of time. He did time twice, if I'm not mistaken, for some petty nonsense that should have never happened. And so he was rich, he was powerful, he was feared in the neighborhood. And if he's giving orders to a guy like Charles Caniglia, who's a captain, and he's a powerful captain, he's a murderous captain, you know these guys were for real. Now, people could say what they want. In the 90s, the Gotti regime, part of the Gambino family, was no joke in my neighborhood. It was a Gambino neighborhood for a very long time. And they had a lot of high-ranking members living in that area, taking care of that area, and he was one of them. And he was settling this for somebody that was very powerful son. So, in Jerry's standards, this is who he is. Bulletproof vest, strapped up, double pistols. He said, listen, he goes, these guys, from my understanding, this is what he said, was these guys are running the world. Like, this is it. Like, what are you going to do? He goes, this guy's son ended up in a hospital. He goes, these are the things you get clipped over. And this is what I'm trying to explain to people that keep asking me, how does this work? That's how it works. You're hanging out with a guy who's very powerful's kid, and you're in the same place as him, and you never even shook his hand, but you're from the neighborhood, and you know who he is, and he catches a beating, he gets hurt, he ends up in the hospital. If you're not connected, if your father's not somebody, regardless that you're being loyal to your friend, his father's somebody. He could put a good word in. You know, he did. He stepped up and said, they didn't do anything because they were with me. And their loyalty lies with me. The beef between them was so bad, he didn't care that he ended up in the hospital. But nothing happened to him. He threw his 2 cents in. But wise guys don't care. Okay. We're not going to do nothing to you. You know, your family. But we're going to get all the guys that were there that didn't do anything, that aren't family. And that's the way it works. This is just one small occasion that was turned out to be a huge thing. So, but this is where it ends. A few guys got cracked. It was, like I said, there was a drug dealer that was there from Ozone Park. I seen him in the car wash. He brought 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 150 people in the car. It was just like everybody goes there to get their car washed. Bang! He gets cracked by a wise guy from our area, not even a Howard Beach wise guy. So he's told to go to Centerville Park at this time from the Charles Manson of the Gambino family because they knew each other, and he knew Jerry was a stand-up guy, and Jerry knew how serious this guy was. So he's like, if he's sending him, and he's got a couple of shooters around him himself, I don't know what I'm walking into. Like I said, this is when the Gambinos were the Gambinos during the Gotti regime. And that's how powerful they were. So he had no idea what he was walking into. So he straps up, puts the bulletproof vest on, walks into Centerville Park. Guy's waiting in the corner, the darkest part of the park. walks over to him. They know each other. Once he sees him, he realizes who he is. They say hello. No hugs, no kisses, just a hello. Jerry's standing a little back from him. He already circled the park 4 times to see who was around. There was a couple cars sitting. He's seen them. Checked his exit points, checked everything. He's going out. So he doesn't get asked any questions. He gets explain the story. Now, you don't turn around and say, what story? You know what he's asking you. It's all over the neighborhood. It's in the gangster blog and the post. You know what I mean? Like it's just everywhere. So, and this is before text messaging and all that stuff wasn't big yet. And he told him the story. He goes, the situation between them two. He goes, everybody was put in an awkward position that night, but I can only speak for myself. I would have loved to help. And if you know me and you know my reputation, I am that type of guy. And he told his story straight up like he always does. That's the type of guy he is, and he told it like it was. And he's like, he did something wrong to him. They were family, and I had to take his side. And if this is what my punishment is for showing my loyalty to my friend instead of respecting the dog for its master, then I got to take my lickings because I got to have loyalty to somebody. I can't be loyal to everybody. If we were all together, then we could be loyal to everybody. He goes, but I don't know him from a hole in the wall. Sure, I know who his father is. Sure, I know who his uncles is. I know who his cousins are. I know who his whole family is. They're very powerful, but he's not my friend. His cousin is my friend, and I had to show him loyalty. And he explained it just like that. And he goes, and if this is what we're here for, and Carmine turned around and goes, they told me about you. And I didn't expect anything less from you. He goes, next time something like that happens, you know what you need to do. And he goes, come here. He goes, 100% the truth. You're going to be one of us one day. And he went to hug him and gave him a kiss. And he felt the bulletproof vest. And he said to him, you came heavy. He says, I came to save my life. He went, wow, we can't let you go. He goes, you got some balls, kid, walking in here like this. He says, that's the way the streets go. And he says, I'll be seeing you around. And he left, and he left. And that was the end of it. And that was all over somebody's very powerful son getting hurt. And a kid from Ozone Park that don't even know him, that don't even like him, that were enemies at this point, didn't jump in and help him out of respect for his father. And guys got cracked. This guy sent Charles Manson to give a message. Usually they send an errand boy, but they knew. Carmine didn't know at the time. They were telling him, but Charles knew. The guys around Charles knew. You give this kid a message, you send a man to give it to him. Because that guy's a man. And that's the way Jerry operates. His name is Jerry Bruno. And he's as real as they come. He's a stand-up guy. And if you ever wanted to call anybody a gangster, that was the guy to call a gangster. Because he would have took everybody out in that park that night without even thinking. He was a loner. He was a guy that went by himself. He kept his business to himself. He never knew what Jerry did or what he didn't do. And that's how Jerry rolled. He rolled like a ghost. And his reputation and his violence only grew. And that was one situation in a club with a guy that wasn't even his friend. And 4 or 5 other guys already got cracked around for this situation. And they had the same stories. But the guys that were cracking around were their own guys, were their own wise guys from their own club on 77th Street that were cracking them around. One situation, there was sit downs, beatings, guy almost getting clipped over a fight, and a powerful wise guy's son getting hurt. One situation. And that's why everybody in Ozone Park and Howard Beach knows exactly what I'm talking about. And the same should probably go for Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst, parts of Staten Island, because they're all cut from the same cloth, and this is what you knew when you went out. Like, if a wise guy's son is bleeding, you might as well take a bottle and cut yourself and start bleeding with him. You know what I'm saying? And I know people say, well, the fuck do I care? I'll tell him this. I'll tell him that. They ain't doing nothing to me. That ain't my problem that he couldn't fight and I was a better fighter. Okay. Everybody says that. Yeah, the life is dead. They're not as strong. The life is dead. And I don't believe in the life anymore. For me, it doesn't suit me. But the people, they're still alive. Always remember that. The life may be dead, but the people are still alive. And in my eyes, the life isn't dead. It just isn't for me, and it isn't for a lot of people. And I'm not saying the people that are born to do that life and to live that life. I'm talking about the people that are in that life that got no business, that aren't built that way. And there's many. And those are the people that I'm trying to reach with this whole platform, with this story. Okay? The way I talk, the way I sound, and the respect that I give a lot of guys that came from that, people think it's glorifying it. The law might think I'm glorifying it. It's the furthest thing that I'm doing. This content, it's not for kids to listen to. It's for that guy who ain't built that way, that's in that life right now. So get his shit and get the fuck out. Okay? That was one situation. And that's how Cosa Nostra used to act. Now I'm pretty sure, even though this whole rumor with the no kill order, you guys just, I'm pretty sure you run into a guy, I run into a guy don't like what I did, doesn't believe in what I stand for, and I could get clipped. Anybody could get clipped in 2021. Just the way life goes when you're involved in that lifestyle. I'll be back with more stories. Hope you enjoyed this one. Stay up.